I think we're good.
215.
For 215.
Movie schmovie.
Movie schmovie.
Steve?
John?
Hello.
That's
How's
your first
everybody
name,
doing?
right?
Yes, my name is Ronald.
Better known as Hello.
So this is a little day and date episode for us.
I like that.
Yeah.
A nice rare thing. We all got to see an advanced screening of the latest Star Wars film. I think we'll do the usual pattern of general thoughts and conversation, and then maybe get into some spoilery thoughts towards the end. So we'll just let you folks out there listening know when it's about to be unsafe, you can consider yourself warned.
Sure.
Just first impressions. There's so much baggage around this film. There was so much about the production history of it. And then just the notion that it's a Star Wars film and that it's the second of these Star Wars stories standalone films. There's a lot of conversation and just stuff to suss out and parse if you're going to really figure out not just what this movie is, but what it represents.
Sure.
So I guess I would say, what were your general feelings about the film and the sense that this was a troubled production? So the fact that they put a movie in theaters seemed almost like an accomplishment.
Yeah, you knew it was going to get to theaters. It's just more impressive that it got to theaters on time. And you could tell that the movie, I mean, it has been ready for a while. Like, it had its, premiere at Cannes, and, they were talking about it way ahead of time. And that's impressive.
Yeah.
Considering that Lord and Miller were replaced almost as the film was wrapping, and Ron Howard comes in and reshoots what multiple outlets say like 70 to 80% of the movie. It's solely a Ron Howard directing credit. Lord and Miller have like an executive producer credit, I think. But I mean, yeah, it's all that considered, like, it's just this weird thing that's happening with their Star Wars stories movies, where they kind of like go with this, outside of the box choice for director, whether it was Gareth Edwards and then that kind of went wrong, or it kind of seemed like it went off the tracks a little bit. And Tony Gilroy comes in and rewrites a lot of stuff, reshoots a lot of stuff, and that movie comes out. For the most part, people really enjoyed it. And you could see the seams in it, though. You could really feel that movie was cut up a bit.
I want to add to that point, Steve. I think you could see that because the marketing push started about a year out from the film.
Totally right. Yeah.
That first trailer was a trailer for the first cut of the film, for the Gareth Edwards version.
You're totally
and by the time the movie came out, even in the second batch of trailers, they had changed the tone in some ways. They had changed certain shots. And then you get to the movie, and some of the money shots from the trailers weren't even
there.
And then, you think about with Solo, there was all this conversation about why they waited so long before they showed any footage or before we saw anything.
Right.
And it almost seems like maybe they learned that lesson from Rogue One.
I'm sure.
Of at least with this production that shifted hands and maybe had a different directorial voice at the end, at least let's present a consistent image of what this movie is going to be.
But what's happening with the Star Wars movies? Like, why is that happening to those films? Like, what is it? And their stories that exist, inside of these original trilogy, the prequels, the sequels. Like, they're in and around these stories. It's like, what's happening with those? Where like it's almost like they think like we're gonna be a little more flexible, a little more like think out of the box with these movies. And you have, Gareth Edwards, and you have Lord and Miller, and, they get brought in, and you're like, oh, cool, these are maybe some genuine ideas or voices of some kind, whatever track they're on. But then, something happens where it's not fitting into the mold of what Lucasfilm wants, and then they come in and replace them with somebody that's maybe more of like a straight guy, like Gilroy. And even though Gilroy is a little different too himself, but especially Ron Howard, to kind of right the ship. It's I don't know, it's weird. All to say, like, the drama around the production was the same and greater than Rogue One for this film. Like, Rogue One had a lot of that too, about the reshoots and changing the story and changing some key sequences. But this movie, you're talking about, like, 80% of it was reshot. Like, that's insane. And to stay on target, to come out, and to deliver the product on time is insane. Impressive too, because I mean, we'll get into more specific thoughts, but I mean, overall, it's just a fun movie, and I think they did a pretty good job, all that considered, to go from, back in the fall, winter, whatever it was, like this whole big hubbub about them being replaced. But all I keep thinking about, like, even after our screening, was just like, because I was talking to Aaron, and maybe we can have a conversation about this too. Was like, I don't understand, like, maybe what their mission is with the Star Wars stories, these outside of the trilogy movies. Maybe I don't understand, like, what they're trying to do, or if they're trying to expand the scope of Star Wars or just like stay in the sandbox that we already are playing in,
Right.
and just like add some detail to it. You know what I mean? And I think that's what maybe eventually is going to lose my interest. Like the discussions about like a Lando film and an Obi-Wan film and all these things, and possibly multiple solo films. I'm not saying that I won't see those movies, especially the Obi-Wan one I'd have interest in. But like, what are they trying to do to get away from like those stories?
I think some of that has to do with the idea that maybe because at this point, Star Wars has its own legs. It's not associated with George Lucas anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what that means is it's kind of like it's like a Jason mask at this point. Like anybody that puts it on is Jason and can kind of move around in it, and there's something kind of good about it, but something also
So
terrible.
you're saying they need to do like a Jason in space spin-off as a
But
Star Wars?
There's something about
movie?
I mean, because it's no longer attached to. I mean, they did a really good job of separating George Lucas from this idea, right?
Yeah, I understand.
The fact that they're so separate means that they can just make this malleable thing, and it doesn't have to have any shape. It doesn't have to have anything if they don't want it to. Because this is the sacrifice. I mean, for all the praise that we give Disney, this is the sacrifice of it being a part of this world. There's like it is a commodity, and I've never felt. I mean, like, sure, when we were younger, there were like Star Wars toys and stuff like this. I've never felt like Star Wars was more of a commodity than when Disney touched it. They have
instantly.
They've hoarded out in a way that like feels a little like. I mean, I don't know. I'm not talking about the integrity, because we're talking about two different things: the integrity of the story versus what it is that they're doing that may interfere with the integrity. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that happen when like, for one thing, we're in an age where we just have too much information, which is something I was kind of talking about, because I wonder the fact that it's an informed thing makes me wonder if it's affected your perception of it. I mean, like, you may think that there may have been some flaws in the story, but would we have been so critical of it if we just didn't know? If it just came from one person, we didn't hear anything about the shitty things that happened with the directors changing hands and things like that.
The studio wants to say we're going to give directors a free hand with these movies, and then as they go along, they get more and more. It's like, you know what you don't know what you want, but you know what you don't want. And so there is still a studio-driven aspect, you know? This is not an auteur-driven franchise.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like Marvel in the sense that it's studio-driven, but it is trying to attract the talent of these directors with visions. And I do think they're sincere in wanting to do that. I think when they hired Lord and Miller, they were proud of themselves for hiring comedy directors to make a film that, if we look at the script by Lawrence Kasdan and his son John Kasdan, it is a funny script. It's got lots of comedy beat. Like the story hinges on kind of a light comedy, the same way that a heist film does, or the same way that a people on a mission film can do, where it's the people interacting with each other. So I can see why they thought, oh, this will be a shoe-in. But I can also see how the script has so much connective tissue that's conveyed in dialogue that if it was this riff-happy atmosphere that Lord and Miller were engendering on set, where there's lots of improv, I could see the studio getting increasingly worried. Are we going to have the movie that we need to connect here? Right. Short of throwing in like voiceover or something like that, how are we going to put all these pieces together? So I can see I was watching this movie thinking, I can see how if this comedy was pushed a little too far, or if the actors were getting a little too far off of the beat, it might have been not the movie that they were trying to make. Now, why are they suddenly getting skittish when they're midway into production with this stuff? I don't know that they didn't save us from a mediocre movie from Gareth Edwards and a mess of a movie from Lord and Miller. I have no frame of reference for that.
There's probably a very good chance that they did.
And Ron Howard is a pro,
yeah,
and they brought him in because he was the guy to bring it in on time and not change the release date.
I
even though that seemed unlikely.
I know.
But what does that say? Back to your original question about the future of this. Mm-hmm. When next time they announce some amazing talent to make one of these movies, aren't we all going to be kind of holding our breath until they actually deliver something? I mean, Rian Johnson's experience is one thing,
right?
And that's kind of heartening. So maybe they've straightened it out now. Maybe they kind of know what the pipeline is, because they haven't announced the next movie yet.
That's
similar to what Marvel's been doing with holding off on announcing a bunch of shit. Maybe that slate, that weight, that burden, what you're talking about with the overexposure. maybe that is a lot of coming from just us feeling like we know what all this is.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, and the
just
fact that it
curious
is a
what
fun movie, as you said, is sort of almost an afterthought to all of this crazy stuff. Like all the stories have been about the Troubles, how it's expected to open low for a Star Wars film, at least in the Disney era. All these things that sort of point to a movie that is much more of a problem than I think this ultimate movie is, which is I don't know. I wonder when it will be that this movie will actually outlive the shadow of the hype, and that Star Wars fans are so argumentative and can't be pleased. It's almost like this is the moment when we see the weakness of the Star Wars brand.
Well, it's interesting because I think, I guess that's the deviation point that I'm curious where it is, because we are very up on like movie news, like we look all the time, but I feel like genuinely a lot of people don't. You know, a lot of people don't know like about the drama behind the production of this film. They just know, oh, it's another Star Wars film. I like Star Wars movies. I'm going to go see it. But I mean, but then there's tons of Star Wars fans that are on top of like the fan sites and know every detail of everything going on. So there's obviously different, portions of people that are at different levels of knowing what's going on.
What's the opposite of a really fun bunch of people? That's what Star Wars fans are.
Right.
Yeah.
So that group of people.
So critical.
Nobody hates Star Wars more than a Star Wars fan. You know?
But I mean, like people that I work with, I know that are really stoked on seeing it. Like they don't really know much about like the behind the scenes stuff happening with it.
But the fact that it's so accessible, though. The fact
It
that
is.
you literally Google it sometimes and it'll that's the first thing that comes up.
But I think a lot of people just go to movies though.
So crazy. Yeah.
I feel like
You're
some
right.
people just go to see a movie because
absolutely right.
they like the trailer.
And this is definitely the catchiest movie if you're going to look for what to see this weekend.
Exactly. And I guess that's what I've just really been thinking about, where that point is, like that fracture point of like knowing too much, knowing enough to know you want to see the movie, which is basically seeing a trailer and liking it, or being familiar with the property and wanting to continue supporting the franchise, whatever. But I guess just as like a content question, I'm so curious what they plan to do with these Star Wars stories, because like they've announced like the Jon Favreau thing, and they've announced the Benioff and Weiss thing,
right.
and Abrams is doing episode 9, but like we don't know much more about these stories, except for like you hear Lando and Obi-Wan, but like again, there's all this connective tissue. Like they're still pulling back to the things and the characters that we've already been introduced to.
Yeah. Right.
And if they want it to exist outside of that, like what platform is going to give that? I don't follow Rebels. I don't follow all this stuff that I hear people talk about.
Oh, you mean the show?
Yeah, Star Wars Rebels.
Right.
I don't, because people were talking about it after the screening and explaining things to me, and I was like, well, I don't know that, but I'm a Star Wars fan, but I don't follow that. I follow
At its
the
best,
movies.
that content can be cool in a way the movies, every now and then something like an episode of Rebels will be cool in a way that these movies can't be, because it is telling a smaller story.
Right.
And it's poking at like a little margin of the universe. But most of the time, I would say that stuff is ancillary, and I would be annoyed if I thought the movies depended on me watching 20 episodes of a cartoon
Agreed.
in order to appreciate it.
I'm not suggesting that either. I'm just curious with this new Star Wars universe of like streaming platform that Disney's going to have. Favreau's doing, isn't that a series?
The live action show that's going to rely on a lot of motion capture.
Right, so that, and then Benioff and Weiss have a series, apparently. Like, what of those is going to give a truly new story that exists in Star Wars?
I think they're going to start doing that a lot. I think here's the thing with Solo, and I think Rogue One as well, but I think Solo in particular. A long time ago, I read that Kasdan said when they brought him on, they asked him what story he would want to write, and he said Solo. Recently, I've been reading that when Lucasfilm went over to Disney, that they got, along with that, the plans for whatever George Lucas was kind of tinkering around with doing, and one of those things was a Solo film, and that they said, we want to do that too, and they offered it to Lawrence Kasdan. So I don't know whether it was the studio or Kasdan, but either way, it was Kasdan saying, yes, I love writing this character, he's the best character because he's funny and he's unpredictable, and we don't know much about him, and the studio saying, we've never really done this, we've never really made a movie about Han yet, I think that was part of the package when things went over to Disney and they were talking about what are we going to do.
Yeah.
I think that was in the hopper. And so I almost feel like it might be the last, and like episode 9, these are the last sort of like burning off the things that are in the hopper that were set in stone and that they knew they were going to do.
Right.
I almost feel like whatever that third story is, whatever comes after that, whatever Favreau's show is like, I think that's where you'll start to see them maybe making more confident moves that do feel like we could step away from this. We don't need the Skywalker story. In fact, audiences are there's backlash against The Last Jedi. There's pre-backlash against Solo. You'd think that one of those movies would please everybody in the fan base, but it doesn't.
I'm like all for like some of this connective tissue, and I think that in a lot of ways it's almost like required just to kind of keep people satisfied.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like relying on it for the gotcha moments or for like the things that people are going to remember about your movie, if it's that, like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like remembering the last 20 minutes of Rogue One and the Darth Vader appearance, most people will talk about that when they're talking about Rogue One. I think that, I mean, I enjoyed that movie too, but I think that's a problem, that's what they take away from that story. Not the hour and 50 minutes prior of this like heist story.
Right.
Or whatever it was. You know what I mean? Whatever you want to angle it as. And I just think that, like, you know, and that's like a missed opportunity to build characters in this world that can exist and not all die. Spoiler alert, you know, between the start and end of one film. And it's just like, it matters to the episode 4, but this movie doesn't matter to these characters really anymore. It's weird. Like, that was my big thing with like Rogue One. And like, I thought about it a lot watching Solo, just like filling in the lines of like who Solo was and the Kessel Run and meeting Lando. And, you know, that stuff's fun. And like, that's like the smile wink moments and stuff like that. But some of the more interesting stuff I thought was stuff with him and Emilia Clarke, you know, and like some of the stuff that had nothing to do with the stuff that we knew already.
Yeah.
You know, some of the less interesting things to me was like how uneventful maybe the Kessel Run felt to me in the film. And more moments of like, you know, when he's just the opening sequence when he's like escaping with her, you know, and trying to get through the checkpoint, and it doesn't, like, that stuff I enjoyed more almost in this film.
I'd heard that Solo got off to a slow start, and I actually found that first half hour to be maybe my favorite stretch of the movie.
Agreed.
Because of the momentum of like what was happening with the character. I enjoyed it. I mean, I'll just go ahead and say, since we're maybe now getting into just
let's do it.
I really enjoyed it a lot, and I mean, I can't say love, but I maybe after a second viewing, maybe after some of these moments stick in my mind more, I thought it was a super fun movie that really traded on the charm of such a great cast, felt so lived in.
Yeah.
And for a Star Wars movie, felt like it had lots of interactions between characters who had interesting agendas and that were bouncing off of each other in a way that's different from the usual good versus evil backdrop. The fact that this movie doesn't really have a rebellion in it, it doesn't mention the word Jedi, it doesn't say the word Force.
No Force.
The Empire is just sort of the cops in this. It's sort of like you're living under a police state. I thought it was a really cool... I mean, granted, maybe to what we're saying here, they could have made a movie that was set in this world that was even more daring and more out there stylistically.
Yeah.
But if we are fans of the franchise, as I am, and we enjoy the kind of stylistic cohesion and the look and feel of the world, I felt like this got down on the street level. I felt like I saw more creatures and prosthetics and costumes and sets. Yeah. And I want to call out particularly, and I don't want to get his name wrong, Bradford Young, the cinematographer. I thought was one of the secret weapons of this movie.
Yeah.
It really looked great. There were so many scenes where just the lighting was very naturalistic looking. The scene at the sabacc table where Han and Lando meet for the first time, and they're sitting there, and it's like it looks like a Renaissance painting or something with the color scheme, and it's just full of creatures.
Yeah.
I felt like those moments really had this pop and this special thing to them that made this movie different from what I was. At worst, I was thinking, okay, maybe this movie will just be kind of like prequel level. And it is a prequel. And it does have some prequelitis things, like you said, where you find out the origin of certain things you didn't need to find out about. Those are moments you can kind of mentally edit out of a movie, like a couple of lines. What was left was a pretty unique story for the Star Wars universe, and I liked the part of the world that we got to see in this movie. So I don't think that it was this pure nostalgia retread that a lot of people are trying to say that it was. I do think it was trying to do something different, and I do think the cast is doing something unique. So
the first thing that comes to mind when I think about it is that, I mean, it may be the best thing about the movie and also the worst, just because it's such a great part of this film and not quite as included in the newer versions of Star Wars, is, like you said, how lived in this feels. There's something about the commitment that this movie really does when it comes to being where they are at any given time. That doesn't feel like it's like kind of shooting between locations. Something I hate. You know, I fucking hate that.
Yeah, we talked about that recently too.
Yeah, and there's something about this movie that commits to them being in the spaces. You see you know what? There's something I've been noticing a lot more as I get into like the 4K, 1080p, highest definition stuff, is as you watch any of the newer Star Wars movies, if you pause it at any given time, it almost looks like a painting every time. Mm-hmm. This one, that scene almost felt like the Last Supper. It almost looked like, you know, Lando in the middle, all these people around. I mean, like, there was a commitment that this movie has to everything environmentally wise. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, so I went to London and went to the Warner Brothers studio. It's where they film all the Harry Potters, right?
Right.
They showed some of the background stuff that they did. They write everything that you see paper-wise is written by hand. There's something about that commitment to building a world that I noticed in that I never noticed in any of the other newer Star Wars movies. And that made me feel weird because I'm like, why didn't the other movies do that? That made me irritated, but it also made me love the movie. So for every flaw that movie had, there's something about how committed they were to that and how present every character felt in that environment that made this feel like I was down on the ground with them too.
And like you said, Ronald, they leave a planet because they're trying to get away, and we know why they're trying to get away. You don't see the planet title card come up. Now, Steve and I were saying we didn't mind it in Infinity War when those title cards came up, but we all agreed that the first part of Rogue One was a mess of cutting from one planet to the next and giving you a title card without any context. Like, this movie felt like the context was the character. And I thought of you, Ronald. I read an interview with Lawrence and John Kasdan about the script where they said, and Lawrence Kasdan said, having written a lot of Star Wars, he had fun that they realized when they were breaking the story that so often in a Star Wars movie, even if you like all the characters, there's a moment where you have to cut away to some other plot line. And he said there's always a moment when you're writing it and you know the audience is not going to be as interested in this other scene. And they, you know, the job is to try to make it so that it's balanced out. But they said making this movie, they enjoyed that they were following a character
for a really long time,
and so
in a good way.
And so there was never a moment where they had to cut away from what you might have been interested in. The bigger challenge was trying to figure out how to move through all of that with your eyes kind of on this character the whole time. And I do think they did a little bit of a kind of a Forrest Gump thing with like, here's all the key moments in Han Solo's history. But it was the story had real momentum to it. So I think what you're saying is very true. That criticism that you offer, Ronald, has a lot to do with just what is the quality of the narrative that's being told. If there's a lack of confidence in the narrative, there is a lot of that cutting around and showing different things. But if you're just kind of following the right character, I thought that was a neat aspect that did come off, and it did make it feel different. Like there was no other group of characters that it had to go catch up with at any point.
I don't think there's anything wrong with taking one of the newer like trilogies or even the end of this one and focusing on one thing. That's not crazy. I mean, like, especially because the end of this is so important. You know what I mean? If it stayed in a scene for like 10 minutes and didn't go anywhere, didn't have any cuts, and all the cuts were within places that were within close proximity, I'm good with that. Right. I'm perfectly good with that. But in terms of just the story in general, I mean, I wish that I had something bad to say. I mean, it wasn't perfect. I mean, it suffered from a little bit of like feeling like this amalgamation of all these things. But that doesn't always feel like a bad thing to me. Like if you
it felt like the adventures of Han Solo, and almost like episodic story. So it didn't all necessarily flow, but it was because it was focused on that character. You sort of felt like, oh, he's out of that fix, and the idea that he's a character who just gets himself out of a fix and right into another fix was part of the plot. So
it felt like we were binging a season of a Netflix Star Wars movie. And that, I mean, that's not any insult to the quality. I'm not talking about the quality.
No, I know what you're saying.
Just the way these stories kind of like...
It was a clip show.
Oh, yeah.
It's the Han Solo clip show.
Right. And what that does for me is it just lets me know that, like... So say if people think that this is a bad version of this, Rogue One, Han Solo are bad versions of this, I think that because these two, Rogue One and Solo, are so different to me...
Yeah,
the differences in those two, even though they kind of had the same subject matter in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a band of people getting together to do some shit, right? Yeah. Even with that, and those stories being as different in the scale, it lets me know that like the side stories can be really good. And there's something about looking at these two. I think Disney's smart enough. I mean, for as much as they do the things that they do, they can look at these two and say, okay, these are two movies that are out We've committed to it, so we know what to do next. So I'm a little excited about
whatever they do.
Yeah, whatever the side thing is now. I mean, I feel like these two they're testing the waters. This is uncharted territory, and we're kind of beta testing this whole idea. We're the first to witness side stories that are not in a book. And I think that despite the fact that is, it's something that should be, Disney should know how it works and all that stuff. They do not. If somebody tells you they do, they don't. You got to put it out.
Yeah.
You got to see on some level a side story and how it relates. And hopefully, maybe the next time it'll be a little more honed into whatever it is that is the pulse of.
Well, Last Jedi made a ton of money and got a pretty good critical reaction, but got a huge, weird fan backlash.
Yeah, right.
This movie is coming out now. I think I'm open to the idea that it could surprise people this weekend. It might do better than people are thinking, and word of mouth might be better. I have no idea. I don't know what this movie's fate is going to be, but if it goes the way people are picturing, it will be sort of an underperformer for Star Wars. So does that mean the fact that they now have a year and a half for J.J. Abrams to get Episode 9 out, is this going to be like the epic course correction of trying to get... Are they going to try to unify all of those audiences, or are they going to say, well, we're going to do what we're going to do, but it's Star Wars, people will come along? You know what I mean? Are they going to take the DC approach of we're just going to keep making these movies because we're not losing money on them? Right. They're laughing all the way to the bank. Yeah. Or is it going to be, is there a way to bring all this back around and make it feel special again and not make it feel like there's just a Star Wars canon that's shooting Star Wars movies at us every so often? Do you know what I mean? Like, can they get that special feeling back? I say that having loved
falls
this
on
movie.
you, Steve. Whatever you say is going to be the fate of this whole thing.
Yes, I think they can.
You think they can?
Period.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you know what I mean? That is a long time to get the next one ready.
It is. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why it's backfired on them that this one's coming out so soon to Last Jedi, because for a variety of reasons, coming out in the summer, it's a risky move because literally you have like a week to make a big ass chunk of money, right. And then next week there's a big fucking movie, coming at you, just like Deadpool.
Yeah.
Number one made a little less than Deadpool 1, but still a huge box office hit. Week 2, Solo comes out. Yeah. And Solo I think actually has a week after it to do a little leg work, but when you put a movie out in the winter, like I feel like we've seen the last few Star Wars films, you have the holidays, you have this family thing. Yeah. There's more rooms for these movies to make big box office. And I think it's risky to put it out in the summer, especially, and they didn't know it till it came out, what you just said about Jedi, like how divisive that
became. 5 months after a very divisive
Star
Wars movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call. I mean, if people go out and enjoy this film, that's only going to help them, and like the anticipation for Episode 9 will only make it that much bigger, and that much of a draw and an anticipation and I'm sure a massive hit. But yeah, I mean, they totally can get it. I mean, it's Star Wars, and Disney knows what the hell they're doing. There's no question about that. My only thing is like, I think the fact that they haven't announced the specifics of a lot of this other stuff, or even what these next Star Wars stories are, I think they're maybe trying to make sure they get Episode 9 right. 100% right, before any of that other stuff starts popping up.
Yeah.
To not distract from that because of what's happened with Jedi and what's happened with this one. But I mean, all that said, I agree with you guys. I really enjoyed it. There are some issues here and there. There are some slow spots, some characterization. I thought that was a little light. I really liked Emilia Clarke in it, which I don't really like her in a lot of the movies she's been in.
I was not expecting for her to be one of the strengths, but she actually was. And actually, her chemistry with Alden Ehrenreich was great.
It was.
And so now that we're talking about that, before we get into spoilers, real quick, let's just say, what did you think of the casting? There was a lot of hype or anti-hype, I guess, about Alden Ehrenreich and how problematic he had been and how they had to hire acting coaches and that was the problem with the movie. When I see this movie, I just don't see that was the case. I could see that maybe they were working hard on that characterization because it seemed like it's a load-bearing bit of acting. He has to sell this character that people associate with another actor. But I thought he was the strength of the film. I thought he was really good.
This is like everybody's asking me. I try to just ask, like, do you love Han Solo the character? Right. Or do you love Harrison Ford as Han Solo?
That's a good
character?
question.
I mean, I honestly, it's such a simple question.
It is a valid question.
But it is literally the litmus of whether you're going to really buy into Alden as Han Solo. Because if you just love Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones on your wall, Harrison Ford, Han Solo on somebody's wall, it's not that. I mean, he is Han Solo the character. He does a great job at embodying the things that you've come to expect from this character, and at least a decade prior to the first time that you met him. So you have to understand that there's going to be differences in this character than you met in the first trilogy. This is a character that's still developing over possibly the course of a decade before you meet him in that first trilogy, and whatever that time difference is. But I mean, I think there's so many things that you'll pick up on that is completely Han Solo, that he gets right, that he does really well. And I think there's some other things happening with the character that you don't necessarily see in the Harrison Ford version in the first trilogy because of what he goes through in this film. Yeah. And I think that's important to differentiate, because I think that's what people will pick apart, like the hardcore people, that they have the expectation, and if you don't meet that, or the story beat that you want, like in Jedi, and they tear it apart, Rey's parents weren't this person, and it's like, fuck that movie.
Right.
Han Solo doesn't do this exactly the way Harrison Ford did Han Solo. Fuck, this movie. Don't expect that. No. I'm not saying he doesn't do really well. He does. But he's not Harrison Ford.
I saw where, there's his performance has been much of what has been talked about going into this. And I've seen definitely reviews that make it sound like he's just terrible in the role. And I'm wondering how many of those people are just not fond of this kind of film, or this kind of swashbuckling adventure, or just like you said, there's a Harrison Ford thing going on. I grew up. I mean, Star Wars came out when I was 4. I saw it. I've been thinking about Han Solo since I was 4 years old. So for about 40 years, I've been thinking about Han Solo. And I do love Harrison Ford. And I love Indiana Jones, too. And I've often thought, I don't want to see those characters recast. They're iconic for him. Yeah. And I thought Alden Ehrenreich was great in this movie. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you really love Harrison Ford and you really love Han Solo, but you understand that they can't go find a 25-year-old Harrison Ford to be in this movie. So what's the next best thing? How about an actor who really, as you said, Steve, puts his own spin on it, pays homage? I mean, he's not doing an impression. He captures more the vibe, the spirit. And I thought he did an exceptional job, to the point where watching him interact with different characters was part of the pleasure of this movie, as opposed to cringing, hoping it wasn't going to start stinking. I started enjoying the way, especially when he and Donald Glover are sharing the screen, there's this swagger off between the two of them that was so amusing and so fun to watch, and felt like those actors were really feeding off of each other.
Man, I don't know if I can get enough of Donald Glover right now, man.
You know what, man? I don't know. I really enjoyed him in Solo. I thought he was great as Lando, and I like him. I think he's great, period. But some of the Lando stuff I didn't love, like some of not him as Lando.
Right.
He's great as Lando. I don't know that I want to see a Lando movie. I don't know if I do, honestly.
I would like to see, maybe if they do another ensemble piece that he's part of.
He's in, right? Okay.
Or I might even like to see if it's like a different angle on, because this character, we know he ends up running a city.
Right.
So showing something about that would be kind of cool. How did he go from this point to that point? But no, I think it's interesting that Alden Ehrenreich didn't do an impression, but Donald Glover kind of is doing an impression. And it does feel a little bit like sketch comedy-ish at points, but I think that it's just a testament to the tone of this movie that it doesn't break the tone, that there's a sort of a larger-than-life character. Because Lando is a performance in the world, too. He's definitely putting on a show. So what did you think, Ronald, of Alden Ehrenreich?
I thought it was great. I mean, this didn't feel like a spot-on impression, more of like inspired by, Sure. And I like that. I don't mind that. I don't mind somebody embodying parts of a person. Obviously there's like inflection and things like that he can hit on. And I'm like, all right, okay, I get that part. I thought he was great. I think also, I mean, we gotta like set something straight. I think that in general, this is like science fiction, man. Like, this isn't like Daniel Day-Lewis level commitment to, like, we need to relax about all that stuff. Like, I mean, sure, these are things we hold near and dear, but this is like, some of this is just heightened craziness.
It's just fun.
It's just fun and just relax. And
so true.
Like, people are talking like, this is not, again, I mean, I'm only say Daniel Day-Lewis because that level of commitment to becoming another person. I think, for what it's worth, Donald Glover and the gentleman that played Han Solo did a fucking good job. I didn't feel like I got taken out of the movie at any point. I thought that they were really fun to watch.
There's definitely a point that you cross, or at least I felt like I crossed, when you're watching Alden play Han Solo. Like, for the first so many minutes of the movie, you're like, okay, I'm watching him be Han Solo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
but there's a
definitely.
point that changes over where you're just like, now I'm just watching Han Solo.
Right.
You know, it's like you're not even really watching that character anymore, that actor be the character anymore.
Right.
You just begin, at least I felt like, begin to buy into the fact that that's just Han Solo.
Absolutely.
That's just a younger Han Solo. You know, and that's an accomplishment. I mean, I think that
so,
says something about the performance.
You know, one of the things I think sells that, Steve, and honestly, I think this is a key thing with the audience buying into the appreciation of this character, is that Chewbacca is there, and he seems to think it's Han Solo.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I really do
he
think,
does.
I think people love fucking Chewbacca.
He's
and
so
I think
good.
Fucking great
and
in
I think
this
he's
too.
great. I was about to say, if you love Chewbacca, this is the movie where you get to see some Chewbacca action.
Everything you wanted with Chewie.
Everything you wanted to
It's
see
there,
him do.
man.
And I would even go on to say that the scene where they meet might be the best scene in the
movie.
film. Like the scene where the most elements are coming together and it's funny and exciting. But yeah, Chewbacca, I think the fact that Chewbacca isn't saying, wait, you're not Harrison Ford.
Hold
He's
on.
got like a little detector.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really do think that's part of it. It's like Chewbacca, even though it's a different actor playing him and he
Yeah.
looks a little different, and I realized something.
He's quick on his feet in this one too.
Back in Star Wars, Chewbacca, who's essentially like an immobile dog face mask, you know,
Yeah.
Harrison Ford, through his performance, made us buy into Chewbacca.
Yes.
And now Chewbacca is returning the favor to Han Solo by making us buy Alden Ehrenreich in the role. And it's this perfect little symmetry. You know, it's similar to the way that like Luke and Yoda, Mark Hamill looking at that puppet like it's real.
Yeah.
Makes you think it's real. And in this case, it's weird that the fake dog-faced alien man is what makes us able to accept, oh yeah, okay, this seems like Han because he's got Chewbacca standing next to him.
I
And
understood.
they've got that rapport.
I understood Chewbacca more this time.
Yeah.
What was that? Is it just like a commitment to words more? Like
You understood him?
I just, you know,
You speak Wookiee now?
no, I just be like situationally. I'm like, I got.
You could just gather what he
you
was
can
trying
gather
to say.
it more than I don't know. Maybe they set.
Maybe
the
because he
scenes
said
up.
more things.
He maybe.
So it's like more chances.
they set up.
Obviously,
the
that would
scenes.
give you more.
How you feel about robots with hips?
Okay, L3. It was Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yeah.
She was a great addition to it. And I thought Woody Harrelson also was a really warm presence and just brought that vibe he brings to a movie. His image does all the work for you of believing that this guy's like a rogue and kind of a scumbag.
I love just like what that relationship, while as short as it was with him and Han, is something that you know and you remember like how it affects him in the original trilogy.
Right.
You know, like the last interchange between them. You know, when he sees what's going on and what happens. If I don't want to spoil anything, but like just the decision that Han makes in that moment to do, like that's an informed thing that tells you a lot about things he does in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And the way he feels about doing those kinds of things.
Right.
In the original trilogy, it's like it kind of started there. Because prior to that point, that's a tough call to make, and like the whole time, like she's calling him the good guy, you know, and he's kind of like, I'm not the good guy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you kind of are, but sometimes good guys make tough calls.
Right.
And like, that's fucking cool. That scene was really good.
Right. The spoilers start now. I really liked the fight between Emilia Clarke and Paul Bettany. Thought that was a cool scene.
It was good.
Because I honestly didn't know that she wasn't going to die. Like, I kept thinking that character was marked for death because I thought it was going to be this part of Han's arc that they were going to try to say he's driven by this tragedy, and I was really glad at the end of the movie that they didn't kill that character. Not only is she kind of interesting, it's interesting to have her out riding around in this yacht, you know, working for Darth Maul or whatever, but it's also just, it would have been
What a twist.
it would have been the third female character sacrificed in this film to deepen the male character that cared about her, because Woody Harrelson's character loses Val, Thandie Newton's character. Or Tandy? Tandy.
I've heard it both
Got to work
ways.
on these names.
I'm going to go with Tandy.
I think Tandy though.
And then Lando losing L3, his robot, who this movie, it's very, very heavily intimated that they've had relations
It
before.
just works.
Yeah, it just works.
Or it works, whatever she said.
But I really liked that beat and that note and what it did for his character, and I thought that was fun. But it did seem like, okay, is every guy in this movie going to lose a female character that he cares about, and it's about his tragedy? So I was glad that you know what they call that. You've heard the phrase fridging.
No.
You know what fridging is? In an old Green Lantern comic, there was a story where Green Lantern's girlfriend got killed and chopped up and put in a fridge, and he found her.
That's so dark.
And Gail Simone, she coined the phrase fridging to say, like, when you rape or torture or kill a female character to further the character development of a male character.
Oh wow.
And I would say we could look at Gamora's death in Infinity War as a possible fridging of her character, because it was about Thanos' character development, and it was about Peter Quill's anger, more so than about Gamora, maybe. Debatable. And I thought this movie dodged that neatly by not having her die. If she had died, it would have been kind of cheap, and I was really pleased. Also, I like the idea, if they are going to come back to this grouping of characters, she's out there as an element. And what did you guys think of the reveal that Darth Maul is still around and an element, you know?
I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was neat.
I mean, arguably some of the best stuff of the prequels was Darth Maul.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to see that pop back up. But then that circles back to my initial worry about these stories.
Them leaning on it.
Yeah, how far do you lean into that stuff?
See, I think you can lean on. I think you can lean on Darth Maul without leaning on.
Why did he take out a lightsaber when he was talking to her?
Because you need the red reflection in her eyes. Oh, then you see when he popped it out. And
doesn't she know what he can do? I mean, it's a weird thing.
I think it's supposed to show that she's like bad.
It's like if Darth Maul had an audience. He's like, they're watching me? Okay, I'm going to kill. And then he takes it out. It's very showy.
But what's more iconic than just his face, though? His double-ended saber. You know?
Well, I mean, people who followed the cartoons and the ancillary stuff have known for years that his character supposedly survived Phantom Menace. But if you're...
I did not.
Right, and I think we should be pure movie viewers.
Right.
It's the first confirmation that he's back, and it forced me to do a little timeline check in my mind of like, oh, wait, so that was however many years before this, so he's been around. And what I liked about it was, if Darth Maul is kind of a big bad, so to speak, in this world, it doesn't step on anything. Like, Darth Maul is an operator. I don't think of him as connected to the Emperor necessarily. I don't think of him as connected to the Sith or working against the Jedi. Or I just think of him as a guy who might have his own schemes. So it does not threaten any continuity to say that Darth Maul and Han Solo could have crossed paths at some point. And that comes around to that final point I want to make, which is this movie's best decision was, and they handled it well, they didn't fuck up Han's arc in A New Hope.
Yeah.
Like, he's at the end of this, he's still a scoundrel who has not embraced any kind of heroic self-image. Han and Chewie are almost like straight up, we're just smugglers. They're just going to work for Jabba, which is, there were like maybe 3 or 4 of those moments that I didn't think the movie needed. We didn't need the, I'm going to have to give you a nickname moment.
Or that crew, like the start of the rebellion and things like that.
You know, what I thought was going to bother me, but didn't, that his name Solo is something they put into the system so he could go through the door. I thought that was, when I heard we're going to hear the origin of his name, I was like, isn't that just his last name? But the way it manifested in the movie, it doesn't bother me that he has like a stage name, so to speak. It's a little bit unnecessary, but my point is that didn't bother me. The other moments where it felt like the movie kind of stopped to have that moment, it's like you just don't need that. I don't need those little explanations of, you know, why he's wearing boots or whatever.
There's a handful of those scenes, and there's some dialogue that's kind of weak and a little corny. That's in all the Star Wars movies.
If someone's thinking they're not going to enjoy this because it's a prequel, there's enough prequel problems in it that you can look for those problems and be bothered by them. But if you go in with just both eyes open, and as you've said, it's Star Wars. It's always been a little corny. It's always been a little heightened. It's always been a little messy.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I think that something that is so underappreciated is like how well Ron Howard can shoot some action scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you guys ever see Rush? Chris Hemsworth?
Yes.
The pace car. I mean, the Formula One car.
Yes.
There's amazing action sequences in that film.
It's a beautiful
and that train sequence in this movie I thought was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Looked so good. Like
the geography of the action was really good.
The idea of like hanging on to the side of the train and the train's rotating, so then you're standing on the train and like the people coming in to steal what they're trying to steal have the guards had like magnetic boots so they could just like walk around it.
Yeah.
That shit was really cool. Like that was a cool little thought, like a well thought through. How could this heist go wrong in every possible way? Like in terms of the alarm going off too soon and another crew coming in to try to steal it right from under you, while still understanding where everybody is, like where she's trying to set this bomb off and she's getting attacked.
That scene scared me. I'm not gonna lie to you. It made me uncomfortable.
It's a cool scene, and like I just love that visual of like a train rotating as it's going around a curve. Just the dynamics of that is really cool. And
do you think they already have the roller coaster people working on that for the theme park?
Done.
Already.
Oh, no doubt.
It's already coming out.
It's happening, dude.
It was so cool, man.
Yeah, that's a cool sequence. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like he gets like and I kind of feel this way myself at times, that he's kind of like a very safe director a lot of times. But he's made some things that have some really incredible set pieces. Yeah. And Rush comes to mind first. Because I loved that movie. It was so surprisingly good. But this one, there's a couple really cool action sequences in it that are easy and clear to watch that I think sometimes doesn't happen with some of the Star Wars movies.
One of the last ones was really good. The one with Emilia Clarke, like the one,
the fight scene.
Yeah, the last,
fight scene.
It was so good.
Yeah.
You know, his character, Paul Bettany's character, was originally a motion capture character played by Michael K. Williams.
Oh, that's who he was. And then with the reshoots,
and then when Ron Howard came on, Michael K. Williams was busy, and they couldn't bring him in. And then, but I also had heard that Ron Howard wanted that character to be human. He didn't want it to be motion capture. But I think that could have been Michael K. Williams. The thing is, I was sad about that.
It makes me so sad.
I was sad about that, and honestly, until I saw how great Paul Bettany was in that role.
He's great.
I thought he was great.
And it's great that it's live action.
Yeah.
I gotta say,
I thought he was kind of scary.
I would have been bothered if it was like a CG character.
Was it like
he had scars and
darker?
He had
when he got angry, his scars
his
got
eyes.
His eyes got redder.
Red.
Yeah.
It got really dark, and he almost looked like flames almost when at some of those scenes. I thought that was.
But it's sad that Michael K. Williams didn't get a chance to be that major of a character. You know, like
hopefully he gets something down the line.
Well, I mean, they can always stick him in another one. That didn't sound like there was any animosity, but I'm sure that chaps his ass that he was going to be the heavy in a Star Wars movie. God. Anyway, well, I don't really have much else to say except, I mean, I think if you're listening, you already know if you're going to see this.
Yeah. Go see Solo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of fun. I feel like in a lot of ways it's almost like if you're not sure how you felt about Last Jedi, if you were on whatever side of it, I think this is kind of like a palate cleanser. It's just entertaining. It's fun. It moves fast. The first 30 and last 30 are really great. And
that's a good.
So just go enjoy it. Just have fun. It's freaking Han Solo.
Yeah.
Have fun, laugh, enjoy the characters that you've always loved, and see what this new story looks like.
Yeah,
it's a go ahead for movie, I think.
Yeah.
Last thing I was gonna say is this is one of the other movies that I felt like when this comes home.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be one of those movies that I'm probably gonna watch.
You're just gonna put it on.
I'm gonna watch it a lot.
Yeah, it's such an easy background
it's just
watch.
you're just watching
totally.
it. Yeah.
If you judge a Star Wars movie based on how many knobs and switches and levers, I don't know if that was a Ron Howard touch or a Lord and Miller touch, but I liked all those quick cuts throughout the movie of something they're doing. Everything felt very tactile in this movie.
There's something I love about movies, but specifically in this Star Wars world. In Force Awakens, it happens when Rey is fighting. Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, and there's a shot where the lightsaber's right by her face, and you can basically feel the world vibrating.
Yeah.
And there's a shot in this movie when they're trying to get out of the Kessel Run, and the booster doesn't turn on, and then it's that rear shot of the Falcon, and it kicks on, and they're in this galaxy, but I just felt the screen vibrate when that
really
kicked
cool.
on. And that was that moment in the movie for me that I felt like watching Force Awakens, where I was like, I feel my body just vibrating. That moment, while I think that whole sequence wasn't great, that moment in that sequence, when those boosters kick on and the whole thing is you can just feel the screen doing that. That's amazing.
It's like you're seeing the heat mirage effect almost on it.
Yes. It's kind of wavy and distorted a little bit. I love it when that happens in the movies. And the lightsaber scene, when she's so close to it, she can just see the matter around it moving.
Yeah.
Oh God. But that scene in this movie made me feel the same way. And it's that, that jump to light speed moment. It's just that never gets old, man.
No, it doesn't.
It's so fucking fun. That's that 4-year-old just coming out.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure.
Sure.
But
it's a fun movie.
It's a fun movie. You can tell. We've had a good time watching
At
it.
4 and 44 and at almost every age in between, Steve. I can get excited about Star Wars.
It just works.
Yeah. It just works. Trust me.
Thankfully, it still does.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that's it, man. Solo's out this weekend. Go check it out. If you were on the fence about it, hopefully this pushes you off of it and you go buy your tickets.
Cool.
We'll be back next week talking with a local filmmaker who has a film premiering here in Baltimore at the historic Senator Theater. Mike Venazzo has been on the show before. His new movie, Bored in the USA, is coming out, and pretty huge thing. They're getting the big screen and everything.
No, I know. That's awesome.
We're excited to have him on the podcast. We'll have him here next week talking about the making of that movie and some films that maybe inspired it.
And like, how did he get the guy to do the score that he got for his film?
I hear like he knew someone who knew someone who may have just been the person himself.
Right.
Yeah.
But he got somebody huge, so we're going to talk that, break that news, see how that goes. You can find us on facebook.com/movieschmovie and movieschmovie.com, and basically every podcast platform you could find podcasts on. And if you don't find us, let us know so that we can get there. And if you listen to us or subscribe to us or however you do it, even if you stream us through a page, if you can leave a comment, share it, review it, whatever you can do, it's always appreciated, and it helps legitimize our podcast and helps people find us, hopefully.
Yeah.
But as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
Lando, fuck that robot.
Did.
I love how like the article's like, screenwriter has confirmed he is pansexual.
Yeah, that's right.